Everyone. This is Todd Pitner, and I have a special guest today, Aaron Day. Before we get going, I want to just double check my YouTube channel here and make sure that I don't blow you out, which usually I just have to hit the volume button on it. So bear with me while I do that. See, this is Todd. I knew it. I knew it would happen. Okay, now I can confidently say hello. Hey, everybody. Todd Pitner here. As you know, I am back doing my Friday live streams. Usually it is titled Epic Cash Live, but this is a special guest that we have today, Aaron Day. So the title is Aaron Day regarding Bitcoin, private crypto, Roger Ver, and CBDCs. And we'll probably talk about some other good stuff as well. I want to just double check the channel to see if I am. The problem is, guys, I'm sorry. The problem is I can't see your comments. So forgive me, everyone, if I'm not engaging with you in the comments. I just can't see it. So we're going to get into it. And 3, 2, 1, let's go, Aaron. First of all, man, I want to tell you, you've been a busy man. You were on with Mike Adams on his show, and then on Wednesday you were on the Alex Jones show for an hour, again hosted by Mike Adams. How did that go, Aaron?
No, I thought it went great. I thought it was a terrific opportunity to get info out about Roger Ver, and then also talk about it in the context of CBDC. So I thought it was fantastic.
Well, I've heard nothing but net from it. I mean, everybody saw it and just nothing but positive comments, Aaron. So thank you for representing freedom and decentralization. And everybody, I am so damned excited because I see you, Jay, David, Jasper, Three-Lita, Epic Rising. I see you in the chat. That means finally something happened. I must have clicked my heels 3 times, and now the YouTube gods are with us. So thank you. Well, man, Aaron, before we dive into some juicy subjects, I'd appreciate you for our viewing audience. Would you mind sharing a little backstory on yourself and just share what the key drivers are in your life today, Aaron Day?
Well, the key drivers, so I'll give a little brief background is I'm a serial entrepreneur turned liberty activist. After being debanked and dealing with government tyranny, I had my second company. I had 2 bank accounts lost and then was destroyed by Obamacare and Dodd-Frank. And so that turned me into a...
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Unpack debanked. When you started going through that, how does that turn your life upside down, Aaron?
Well, so for me, I was debanked before it was cool. So this was, this was like 2007 and 2008. And I had a couple of different bank accounts. I had a company that provided financial incentives for employees to improve their health. So we were basically paying tens of thousands of people every month. We were paying them either using a prepaid debit card that would be reloaded, or we would pay them using checks. We actually mail out checks through a check writing service. And so because of Dodd-Frank, so we had a separate bank account for the prepaid debit card where we would fund the debit cards, and then the debit cards were already issued and that it would be reloaded. And because of Dodd-Frank, abruptly, we were given like 60 days notice. So we had these clients that had been with us for years where we were reloading the funds every quarter, and we were given 90 days notice that was completely shut off.
Wow.
So that bank account was shut off. And if you've ever tried to set up a relationship for this kind of prepaid thing, especially if you're talking about 2007, 2008, it actually takes more time than that to get set up because you had to even then go through anti-money laundering process. Like it's a whole onboarding process that took 6 months just for compliance because they were afraid that, you're going to be using these debit cards for money laundering. So the second was, and I wouldn't even qualify this as me being debanked, but we worked with a check writing service that had been in business for 30 years. I mean, they literally had thousands of clients all over the country. And the way that the model worked is they were able to write checks for about 1/5 of the cost for me to do it in-house because they were doing this, in bulk.
Yeah, sure.
So multiple clients would send money to their bank account, and they would pool the funds in one account and then just write the checks out of one pooled account. Well, Eric Holder decided in 2007, 2008 that one of the many clients that this check writing service was using was involved in offshore illegal gambling.
Okay.
So they froze the entire account representing all of the clients.
Wow.
So we basically had checks that went out. I think it was somewhere between, I don't know, it was $250,000 and $500,000 of checks that went out to nurses working in hospitals across the country in our program. All of the checks bounced. And then we went to the DOJ and said, hey, can we put the funds in again just to make sure that the checks don't bounce? And they said, not only would they not let us do this, so we had to actually find a separate way to write all of these checks. But then we were presumed guilty, and we had to spend months and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to prove that we were innocent and that we weren't one of these clients involved with offshore gaming. So obviously, that bank account and that entire relationship was lost. So I was no longer even able to offer check writing as an option. Now I was not able to use reloadable debit cards, but that's okay. I didn't have to worry about that because my business model was effectively deemed illegal by Obamacare. So that was pretty much the end of that. And this was a company that was profitable in 43 states. We were on Good Morning America. We were
Wow.
on the NBC Nightly News, and so let's just say that radicalized me, even more than I might have already been.
Oh, I can imagine. Thank you for sharing that because I don't think people really understand, um, well, especially today, those who speak truth to power, right? How when you're over the target, and if you yourself get targeted, what that might look like. And I just like people to think through, those who have gone through being debanked, how it totally disrupts their lives. And so I applaud you, and I know that iron sharpens iron, and that was the genesis of some of your activism. So thank you for sharing that. So I interrupted you. Sorry. Continue.
So here's the thing about that. The thing was, I wasn't even targeted. Nobody at the
Right.
DOJ was, and so my conclusion was in 2008 that government's incompetent. And I've since been more radicalized, and I realize it's actually malicious. And so, I mean, now I have friends that are in prison, and that, there are businesses and individuals that are being explicitly targeted by the government. This is not just an act of incompetence or collateral damage. Now it's actually explicit targeting for people that are engaged in lawful activities. I mean,
Right.
this is the important part about this. And so I'm glad Mark Andreessen talked about the debanking thing on Joe Rogan a
Yeah.
week or so ago.
Mhm.
Although what frustrates me about it is he's known about this for years and nobody was speaking up. I mean, there have been a lot of us talking about debanking for a long time, and it just didn't get, it didn't get the airplay. And so somehow, a lot of people are embarrassed when they're debanked, but more of my friends are debanked than not.
Wow.
And so at this point in time in the Liberty and it's actually been government policy. We had Operation Choke Point 1,
Yep.
where if you were a gun business or you were a payday lender or a whole long list of like 20 different categories, you were debanked. And now we have Operation Choke Point 2, Choke Point 2.0, and they've been vigorously going after anybody in the crypto industry as a company and as an individual. But if you look at the list, Melania Trump, Barron Trump, Kanye West, Nick Fuentes, Dr. Joseph Mercola, and others, Mike Adams. I mean, I think, again, these are all people that no one was accused of a crime. No one was convicted of a crime in all of these situations. These are people that were debanked for political reasons. And so, to me, this should be a huge, alarm, but it gets worse than that. Once you study how the banking system works and how money
Yeah.
works, you realize that you've got to get out. You're also not going to fix it by voting. It's actually a systemically corrupt
Sure.
problem.
Wow. Well, I think okay, so continue a little bit, give people some backstory on yourself so that before we get into the juicy stuff, everybody kind of knows where you're coming from, Aaron.
So I moved to New Hampshire after all of this happened as part of the Free State Project with my last company. And I became a political activist. So if you're not familiar with the Free State Project, the Free State Project is a movement to get 20,000 libertarians to move to New Hampshire and basically make New Hampshire the beacon of liberty on
Mhm.
earth. And so I got involved with that. My wife and I were involved in a variety of different organizations to help get people elected. I think we've gotten over 200 people elected at the local level in New Hampshire. Also got involved politically trying to get politicians elected at the, for Congress and governor and everything else. Even ran for office myself, not running to win, but I was running strategically to change the outcome of
Okay.
the election. And after doing that for a while, I gave up completely on politics.
Is it because they are selections, not elections, would you say?
They are absolutely selections, not elections. And there's this myth, there's this hope and this belief and this aspiration that politics works from the grassroots and from the bottom up. And that could not be further from the truth.
Right.
And I mean, I even learned that at the state level. So I didn't really care about Washington, D.C. Remember, the focus of this Free State Project is to focus on New Hampshire. And then what I found was we had politicians that were elected to Washington, D.C. that were influencing state votes on state-based matters because they thought the perception would impact negatively their chances at reelection to Washington, D.C. And that's part of what I got involved in. I ran for U.S. Senate specifically to cost Kelly Ayotte her Senate seat because she got involved in I'm not going to go into all the details at the state level, but basically she wanted Republicans to pass Obamacare Medicaid expansion so she would get reelected. And I said, listen, if you're going to meddle with the state and you're going to pass this gigantic entitlement program, this expansion of Obamacare, then I'm going to run as an independent and I'm going to recruit a slate of candidates to run and basically shut you out. And I did. She lost. It was the most expensive U.S. Senate race per capita.
Wow.
In United States history. She lost by 1,700 votes. I got 17,000 votes. There's no doubt about whether or not. But here's the problem. The problem is, even with that, having done that, the people at the local level didn't take that as an example that, hey, we can influence these things as third parties. They ended up kowtowing and they ended up reauthorizing Medicaid expansion anyway. And so I'm kind of like, you know what? I just went through all of this. I ended up in $280 million worth of lawsuits because of this, which, it's, by the way, I got debanked before it was cool. And I got lawfare before it was cool. So I guess just follow me to figure out what the next level of tyranny is going to be.
Unbelievable, Aaron.
So then I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to move into alternative systems. How do we exit and build? And so
Yeah.
I got into crypto. And I will say, as part of the history of this, I learned about the Free State Project through a radio show called Free Talk Live,
Okay.
which was hosted by Ian Freeman and Mark Edge. And I learned about Bitcoin in 2012 from Roger Ver.
Mm-hmm.
And Roger Ver had learned about Bitcoin from Ian Freeman from Free Talk Live in 2010. So anyway, long story short, I exit politics and then I stop using a personal bank account. And I figured, look, if you want to end the Fed, just ditch the dollar, right? So stop using this. And then 2020 happens. We go through all this COVID tyranny. And then I noticed that my friends, particularly at this intersection of liberty and crypto, were being targeted explicitly by the federal government. So this wasn't like my situation of being debanked, where it's just like, okay, here's bad government policy, and then here are the effects. These are people like Jeremy Kauffman, who ran Library, which was a decentralized version of YouTube. He was targeted for 5 years by the SEC and had his business destroyed. Ian Freeman, who I learned about the Free State Project from, is now in federal prison for 8 years for selling Bitcoin without a license. They had 5 departments of the federal government involved in setting him up and raiding him. And by the way, his case was completely bogus. He actually didn't even violate the law. He tried to comply with the law. He had an opinion letter from a lawyer. He didn't engage in any illegal activity, but they wanted to set him up because he was an impactful liberty activist. He was running ATMs throughout the state. He was onboarding merchants with point of sale systems to take cryptocurrency. He onboarded Roger Ver.
Wow.
So my wife and I are, at his sentencing hearing. And before we went to a sentencing hearing, I actually went to Roger Ver and I said, hey, Roger, would you be willing to retweet that, Ian has this hearing? And he did. And then 7.5 months later, Roger's arrested in Spain. thrown into the same prison where fellow libertarian and his friend John McAfee died
Right.
under
Yeah.
mysterious circumstances. And he's now been in Spain for 7 months, facing extradition in 109 years
And
for
he's still in prison though, or is he out on not parole, on bail?
he's out on bail, but he has to check in every other day. Literally, he's on Majorca. He can't leave, can't go on a boat, can't travel, and at any moment in time, they could arrest him again, and he has no like lead time. He can't resolve any of his issues. He can't return his rental car. Like they just show up and they're gonna extradite him, throw him in prison.
Amazing. And everybody listening right now, I really encourage you to go to Brighteon Brighteon.com. Or Alex Jones. You can go to Alex Jones and listen to the Wednesday airing, which Mike Adams, my co-host partner for Decentralized TV, he was the host for 3 hours, and he had Roger on during the second hour where he had a basically a mask on, so he could not talk. I want to ask you about that. And then you were on right after that, and it was all I see right there, freeroger.org. Why don't you tell us a couple of things? What were those couple hours like and for, and what did you guys discuss? Tell us about freeroger.org. How can those watching might have a positive impact? And tell us about the mask, why he had a mask on.
So the first segment was Tracy Thurman, who's running the freerogernow.org campaign, and was physically next to Roger. So
Yes.
she's able to kind of speak about what's going on about his case. And then Roger had to have this piece of tape over his mouth that said censored because, if you've ever been in a lawsuit, which as I mentioned before, I've been in $280 million worth of lawsuits, what happens is everything that you say, the other side will use against you in the court proceedings. So any what's called extrajudiciary statements that you make, they will absolutely throw right back in your face and throw it right into the legal filings. But Roger has an even bigger risk, which is it could potentially, him speaking out, be cause for revocation of his bail. So he could actually get thrown back into prison depending on what he says or if it doesn't match. Because you have to understand, he's not a U.S. citizen, and then he's in Spain, which is also not where he lives. So now we might be sitting here thinking, well, under American rules and under American laws, well, he's a non-U.S. citizen where the U.S. government is trying to extradite him in the country of Spain, which has a different set of legal parameters than we do. So he is not really able to speak for himself without being at incredible risk of either being immediately thrown back in prison or, which is a guarantee, having whatever he says used against him.
Why was he put in prison in the first place, Aaron?
Well, he's put in prison for, they're saying, like tax fraud and mail fraud. So I'll give you an example. They're trying to add 20 years, or I think maybe 60 years, 20 years each, because he mailed in his tax returns. And they're saying that he did not report accurate information on his tax returns and he sent it through the mail. So each time you do that, it's 20 years. So the total amount of jail time he's looking at is 109 years. But to take a step back, Roger left the United States in 2014. And to even go back further than that, Roger had issues with the US government going all the way back to the late 90s, early 2000. He was in California, in Silicon Valley. He was running for libertarian as a politician. He spoke out against the ATF. And he was arrested for selling fireworks, illegal fireworks through the mail, even though major retailers like Cabela's and others were actually selling these fireworks. He's the only person in the United States to go to prison for selling these fireworks. And it's because of his political speech. So he had 10 months in this federal prison, horrible experience, psychologically tortured. And he talks about this, on his website and videos about it. So he realizes kind of 2001, when he gets out of prison, I've got to leave the United States. I'm not safe here. I can't speak my mind about the ETF, or the ATF, the IRS, and others without, risking losing my freedom. So he begins this process of trying to expatriate. He actually moved to Japan in 2006. But because he had this federal conviction, it was actually hard for him to expatriate, and then eventually settled and found, and St. Kitts welcomed him in 2014. So he officially expatriated, left the United States in 2014. Now, when you expatriate, you have to pay basically an exit tax. So
Okay.
it's basically like an unearned. You have to pay 25. You have to value what your assets are worth, and then you have to pay like a 25% tax on that. So kind of unrealized gains, if
Yeah.
you will, like what Kamala Harris was talking about potentially doing. And so,
Like the French government just did legislated in, or
yes,
they're
like
attempting to.
exactly. And so Roger at this point, he was known as Bitcoin Jesus. As I mentioned, I learned about Bitcoin from him, but
Right.
basically he was the first retailer to take Bitcoin. He was the first investor in the Bitcoin ecosystem. He got this name Bitcoin Jesus, which he doesn't like, but he
Yeah.
got the name because he would evangelize Bitcoin, and he would go all over the world and he would give people Bitcoin. And when he would go to shops, he would try to get the shop owner to take Bitcoin. I mean, he did more single-handedly from say 2010 to 2015 to onboard merchants and build the ecosystem than anyone. Like literally Bitcoin wouldn't be where it is were it not for his activities. So in 2014, so he'd amassed a lot of Bitcoin, but he had Bitcoin personally, and then he had different corporate entities and everything else. And some of the corporate entities were in Japan. So anyway, we get back to this whole exit tax. Well, how do you value Bitcoin in 2014? Well, first, the IRS didn't have clear rules on Bitcoin at all. There were no, and I remember this in 2014. We didn't know if it was an asset or if it was a cryptocurrency, how you value it, what the right formulas were. And even the IRS admitted there weren't great guidelines for this. But
Right.
on top of that, the largest exchange in the world at the time, and there weren't a lot of exchanges in 2014, Mt. Gox had just had a major hack and it just blown up. So
Yeah.
there was essentially no liquidity for Bitcoin. Well, when you look at the rules, so if you're the large holder of an asset under normal calculations, not even taking into account it's Bitcoin and we don't even know if it's taxable or in what category, if he would have sold all of his Bitcoin, given that there's no major exchange, it would have crashed the market. I mean, Bitcoin would have essentially dropped to zero.
Right.
Nevertheless, Roger hired the best lawyers and the best accountants because he knew the US government would go after him. I mean, he's already had this experience. This is why he's leaving. So he knows he's got to dot his I's, cross his T's, hires the best people he can, goes through this process, and pays his exit tax. They then come after him 10 years later and claim he didn't pay enough, but they won't tell him how much. He has tried to negotiate. He's tried to say, hey, look, if there's a discrepancy, please show me what it is. They haven't shown him anything. They've filed a FOIA request to actually find out what it is that he is allegedly to have done. No response. So he's basically been sitting in Spain, effectively gagged for 7 months and not having any opportunity to even understand how much he was supposed to pay. In the meantime, during this time period, I think Coinbase had issued like 80 or 90,000 different forms to people because most people didn't even pay tax at that period of time. So other people were given a form and just said, hey, listen, fill this out. You didn't pay your taxes. No one has faced this kind of criminal situation, and he paid his taxes. In fact, his crime might be he was like the only guy in 2014 to try to pay his taxes, right? Talk about no good deed goes unpunished. And so in the meantime, as this been going on, Michael Saylor was able to negotiate his tax liability. FTX, which owed billions in taxes, settled for pennies on the dollar. Nobody went to jail. Nobody was threatened with jail. And now we have Rogers, this one single standout, facing essentially a life sentence in prison for who knows what at this point in time. Rogers' team actually posted, and you can find it at freerogernow.org. At the bottom, there's this motion to dismiss, and he released his emails with his attorneys and with his accountants showing that he was trying to pay his taxes, showing the back and forth that he was trying to figure out what the proper way. And in fact, Roger was trying to go overboard. He said, listen, they're going to come after me hard. They're going to try to make an example of me. I'll even take more liability than I should, just to make sure that there are no issues here. And all of that correspondence has been released. And so it looks to me that they actually lied to the grand jury and they actually fabricated a case based on lies. And in the middle of this process, They violated Roger's attorney-client privilege. They actually had armed IRS agents go to his lawyers, break into his lawyer's office, and basically steal his confidential communication. And attorney-client privilege is a sacred right that everybody relies on.
Sure it is.
This isn't a crypto case. This isn't a big guy versus small guy case. We all rely on attorney-client privilege, and that was violated. And even though it was violated, the information that they collected through that unconstitutional legal process shows that Roger was trying to comply with the law.
Wow. Well, I will tell you, Aaron, I am I'm one of these guys, it's worn out, but it's my good book that I've studied for years and years and years. And I know how the story ends with Jesus, and if he's the Bitcoin Jesus, they're going to crucify him. It sounds to me like they're going to crucify him, or they're attempting to crucify him, but there is the resurrection. And that resurrection, I don't know, could it come in the form of the fact President Trump is being elected? What are the chances that President Trump unilaterally pardons Roger Ver, or perhaps the incoming DOJ might drop the egregious charges against him, Aaron?
Well, in my opinion, it's pretty high. I mean, if Trump finds out about it, and I wrote an article about this for Brownstone, it's just a matter of making Trump aware. Because if you look at what's happening to Roger, it's the exact same thing that's happened to Trump. Like, it's identical. So Trump has dealt with this. Trump has been audited repeatedly by the IRS. They've weaponized it like they did in the state of New York. He's had his attorney-client privilege violated with Michael Cohen, and it's all for a very specific reason. It's all lawfare to shut him up. They didn't want Trump to run again. And what did Trump say he was going to do? He was going to expose the truth about everything from, J6 to the deep state to Epstein to JFK, and that he was going to come in and clean up the deep state. And they didn't want that to happen, so they used lawfare against him. Yeah. Roger is a threat to central banks and to corrupt fiat currency. He's done more. He's the most effective person on the planet at getting people to adopt alternative currencies. What is the IRS? The IRS is a collections agency for the Federal Reserve. That is effectively what they do. So Roger is a target because they want him silenced. They don't want him out, because one of the things Roger was doing is he's exposing the hijacking of Bitcoin with a book that he had just written, but he was also starting to promote privacy coins like Zeno, which in his opinion, which I happen to 100% agree with, the problem that we have with Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies is they're on public ledgers and they can be tracked. And we know that the government will spend $1 trillion to collect $50, right? I mean, a lot of people will say, well, it's expensive to track. Well, they're not looking at ROI. I think I just saw that there was an extra $46 billion spent by the IRS to collect 4.6 billion.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like these people. So Roger was about to, and in fact, 3 days, I believe, before he was arrested in Spain, he had given a talk about privacy tokens being the future and kind of the evolution and what people thought Bitcoin was. And so this is all about silencing him using lawfare so that they could, frankly, in my opinion, have a better shot at issuing CBDCs without competition.
Exactly. I want to get to ultimately CBDCs, and I want to end with a discussion on private crypto. But before we do that, I'd like to discuss Bitcoin for the benefit of everybody who may be watching, who might not be crypto savvy necessarily. Right now, the grandfather of all crypto is Bitcoin, and it currently enjoys just under a $2 trillion market cap. Trades right under $100,000. I think it's just under 2 trillion. Trades at just under $100 a coin. It got over that. And Aaron, I just reread Satoshi's white paper before we got on. And you know what? Nowhere did I find the vision of creating the world's slowest, most expensive digital surveillance asset. Did I miss something, Aaron?
Yeah, I've reread it recently as well. I didn't see the BlackRock section either.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about that, because everybody should know, once Vanguard, BlackRock, and Berkshire Hathaway, once they start investing into something and controlling it, it's just right, Aaron, it's a manipulated, manufactured trend more than anything, right? People don't know what they're getting into. They're just taking their downloads from mainstream television, and Bitcoin. Now that the only reason why there's any fervor over Bitcoin is because it's blessed by the Druid Babylonian bastards, right?
That's true, and there's a lot of propaganda and censorship that has suppressed the alternative. In fact, I would argue that people don't have informed consent with respect to, but buying Bitcoin, and especially now that the government is talking about using taxpayer funds, which I think is something out of an Ayn Rand villain character arc, to buy Bitcoin. But the white paper for Bitcoin is it's supposed to be peer-to-peer digital cash. It's something that's supposed to be used for payments. And what it's morphed into is slow, expensive, non-fungible surveillance digital gold.
Yeah,
I
that's
should probably
right.
come up with a better way of saying it, but that's what it is. It's slow, expensive. It can be tracked. We all know it can be tracked. It's non-fungible now because they can flag different Bitcoins. So if they can track all of the Bitcoin, they can say, hey, we don't like your Bitcoin, and so we're going to put your Bitcoin on a blacklist. Well, that means that one Bitcoin is not the same as another Bitcoin. You can actually start putting lists out, and so it's no longer fungible.
Now
And so
you referenced the term they, and whenever I hear someone talk about they, I always like to unpack it. So I want to have fun with this one. Okay.
okay.
Remember the McDonald's marketing campaign with they had the running total of how many burgers were sold. I think it got up to like over 60 billion sold before they stopped promoting that on all of the golden arches.
Yep.
Well, did you know that the marketing genius behind that campaign now works for a major digital asset player? And I'll give you the new company tagline, and I want you to tell me which company it is. Okay?
Okay.
This is their tagline. You know, the over 2 billion burgers sold. The new tagline is over 1.2 billion transactions surveilled. Who is that, Aaron Day?
Well, it sounds like chain analysis to me.
Yes. Ding, 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 ding. Good job. Chain analysis. Tell us about Blockstream and chain analysis, the two largest players in the blockchain intelligence, and explain why they've created likely the world's largest digital surveillance honeypot. Aaron.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was watching a documentary about this last night, and I didn't even realize all of this. And so I mentioned earlier when Roger was trying to expatriate that the largest exchange, Mt. Gox, had imploded at the time. There was a major hack. Well, it turns out when that hack took place, a new, obviously there were new exchanges that were being formed that wanted to fill the void. And one of those was Kraken. And one of the co-founders of Kraken actually left Kraken and started Chainalysis. And so the whole point of Chainalysis when it was started was to track the Mt. Gox funds and to try to find out who was responsible for the Mt. Gox hack. Well,
Oh,
it then turns out that the FBI got involved with chain analysis, and they started working together, and they have since formed quite a relationship. So this goes back to like, I don't know, 2014 that Chainalysis started. And it started out as just a private company that was trying to like track down this particular hack, but it immediately got into bed with the FBI and
wow.
has subsequently gotten involved with the CIA and others. And so now, so they've been tracking the blockchain and looking at these transactions now for a decade. I mean, so this is something that,
Wait a minute. You mean Bitcoin is not private? Somebody can see the transactions, Aaron?
Bitcoin is not private. In fact, it's the opposite of private. I mean, essentially the way Bitcoin works is, I mean, it's a blockchain. So every 10 minutes, new transactions are added to the blockchain. So it's an immutable database. So unlike a centralized database, you can't go back and reverse any of the transactions. And then computers are trying to solve complicated math problems. And the computer that solves the math problem first adds the next set of transactions to the chain. And then that database is distributed to tens of thousands of people. So not only is it not private, but there are tens of thousands of copies of the database of all of the transactions all over the world.
Right.
And because of this chain analysis process, if you've ever touched an exchange, you're identified. And so then they can track all of your other behavior. And that's what they've been doing. And they've been doing this. Now the exchanges work with the IRS to hand over the information. So the probability of you being able to keep your Bitcoin private is, if you happen to be somebody that mined it 10 years ago and you never touched an exchange, then maybe you can do peer-to-peer transactions without being identified. But this is not a practical thing for the overwhelming majority of people using Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I want to give everybody a visual, okay? I want you to visualize you going to the state fair, okay? And you have your cotton candy and popcorn and big gulp Coke, that's really good for you. And you're walking around and you have to go to the restroom. And you go up to all of the porta potties, right? And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, the ones with doors that are opaque. But when you see the door that is not only open, but it doesn't have a door, and there's somebody in there going to the restroom, like Michael Saylor, you can actually just see him sitting down, whatever he's reading or whatever. That's Bitcoin. Okay. You can see it. You can see everything they're doing. And the doors beside it that have doors that are opaque, that's Zeno, that's Monero, that's Firo, that's Epic Cash. You can't see in them. All of them have their various different ways of being able to either obfuscate their confidentiality or the transactions, or they don't have any data on the blockchain or whatever. But you have to know Bitcoin is a surveillance coin, right?
It is a surveillance coin. And so this is really problematic now that we know that CBDCs are on the horizon, or I would argue we already have CBDCs, but it is a surveillance coin. I mean, this is how they caught Ross Ulbricht. This is how they caught, Ian Freeman, even though Ian Freeman didn't actually do anything wrong. They ended up stealing, I think, $5 million worth of his Bitcoin, even though he didn't even owe anything for taxes. And then they actually held him responsible for somebody else's behavior, but they were able to track his transactions on the blockchain. They were able to track Roger's transactions on the blockchain. And I've been told that they basically are mapping out everything, and that they're spending, even though it's not a cheap process to do, they are going overboard to do this, which is why if Roger loses his case, I talked to somebody that worked for the IRS and said that these 87,000 IRS agents that they're hiring, the number one area that they're hiring for is crypto compliance. So everybody needs to be concerned about this. And so there's some people, and I don't necessarily want to get into the Bitcoin wars or even the block size wars,
sure,
but I will say that the people that should be the most concerned about Roger losing are actually Bitcoin maxis, because it's Bitcoin that they're going after. It's his Bitcoin from 2014 and 2017 that they're going after, and they clearly can be tracked. I've actually been binge watching documentaries on YouTube about various hacker cases and what the surveillance was about this. And I recommend people to just Google some of this stuff, and you'll find that there was some guy, Bitcoin John or something like that, Bitcoin Jim, who ripped off Silk Road. And they found him using chain analysis. Like, once you start looking at all of this, you'll find out that it really smart people. I mean, the kinds of people that have been caught doing chain analysis, these are people that have 140 plus IQs that were early to cryptocurrency. Yeah. So like this isn't like, oh, these guys were careless. It's really easy to track a public ledger, and in particular, if you're motivated to do it, which the government is, because they view cryptocurrency as a threat, then they're going to go overboard to make sure that they can track everything that they can, and they have.
How vulnerable is Bitcoin to quantum computing?
I don't know. That's a question for debate. I saw this thing about Willow last week. Is quantum computing actually close or not? I don't know the answer to that, but it certainly is at risk.
Closer than it was yesterday. I mean, that's the trend is going to put it this way. I ask that as a softball question, Aaron, in that you don't want to be on a transparent blockchain. You want to be able to move value privately, wouldn't you say?
You absolutely want to move value privately, and you also want to be involved in projects that are actually actively doing development, because it's an arms race. Even when you look at the privacy coins,
Right.
there's never a situation, and I will say this, I'm not a crypto maximalist of any kind. I'm for peer-to-peer digital cash that's private, but there has to be multiple cryptocurrencies, and I will tell you why. The CBDC pilot that the US is working on can do 1.8 million transactions per second. So understand, there's no privacy coin or any other coin, privacy or otherwise, that can do that kind of transaction capability. And so we're going to need multiple coins, and we should embrace multiple coins, because
Amen.
yeah,
Amen.
because the kinds of people that are working, it's the WEF and the UN. I mean, this whole CBDC thing moves towards a global digital currency backed by energy credits. They want one global currency, and they want it to be backed by energy credits. The solution to that is not for us to pick one currency, cryptocurrency,
Yes.
to compete against them. It's about
Amen.
competition
Amen.
and
And
development.
and I want to tee something up for you too, because you are a huge activist of being the Paul Revere of CBDCs. And let's think through superior money, right? I think it would be considered superior money would be considered digital, so that it's portable, durable, acceptable, divisible, uniform. And I'm going to throw out uh, a few terms, and I want you to tell me what I'm describing here, Aaron. Unlimited supply, centralized, opaque monetary policy, closed and permissioned, risk of seizure, privacy invasive, and it enables censorship. What am I describing there, Aaron?
Well, it sounds like the Federal Reserve today, but it also sounds like the CBDCs. But I mean,
Bingo.
but at the same time, we have that today, which I would argue that we already have CBDCs.
Okay,
Uh,
unpack that.
so I started this process. So when my friends were being targeted, I wanted to look into, well, why is this going on? So why are they going after Ian Freeman? Why are they going after Jeremy Kauffman? And this was right after COVID. And what I found was that we went from, there were 35 CBDC pilots in 2020. And most of these were just at the research phase. Other than China, there were like 34 countries that were just evaluating whether they should do it or not. Fast forward to today, 134 countries representing 98% of global GDP are pursuing CBDCs. And 64 of those are beyond the research stage. 11 countries have already implemented a CBDC. There are more CBDC accounts globally than cryptocurrency accounts. And so what I'm warning people about this, I'm saying, guys, we've been asleep at the switch here. Cryptocurrency adoption is nothing
Nothing.
compared to what's going on with CBDCs. And so once I saw that, I'm like, okay, so this is why they're going after, in particular, the intersection of liberty and crypto people.
Yes.
And then I actually had interviewed Roger 3 weeks before he was arrested in Spain. And then right after I interviewed Roger, I interviewed a guy named Steven Nerioff, who was a lawyer who created the ICO, the initial coin offering, the security token offering. He was the lawyer at the foundation of Ethereum. And he was a whistleblower, and he found some stuff that he didn't like between Ethereum, the SEC, and everything else. So the DOJ made up an extortion case against him, sent 12 FBI agents to his house in the middle of the night, put him in cuffs, threw him in a van, showed him a list of like 2 pages of names, and said, unless you get us information that leads to indictments and convictions, you'll never see your kids again. And on that list was Roger Ver and Naomi Brockwell and Patrick Byrne, and a lot of people that we know, and a lot of people that are in the Liberty crypto space. And that was 2019. So what that tells us is the DOJ was literally manufacturing a case to get somebody to spill information that they didn't have. They were fishing on a fishing expedition using basically somebody not being able to see their kids for the rest of their life to get information to target explicitly crypto liberty people. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is actively going on. And the DOJ dropped the extortion case against Nerioff, and now he has hired Alan Dershowitz, and he's suing the federal government for $9.8 billion.
Wow.
Like, that's how big a deal this is. But so I realized at that point, I have to warn people about CBDCs. Like in fact, but the conclusion I came to is this is the single biggest threat to human liberty. Once they can completely program and censor and monitor all of our money digitally, it's over. It's the end of free will because they'll tie it to a social credit system. So I wrote a book.
Do they outlaw cash?
They will outlaw cash. It is not a prerequisite. You can have CBDCs and have cash. In fact, one thing that I would like to say, all cash is a paper token that represents a database, a financial liability in a database. That's all paper cash is.
That would be the serial number on the note.
They have serial numbers on the note, and then I started exploring this further. They're using nanotechnology. They're looking at other surveillance technology to put in cash. So everybody that sits around saying, "Oh, well, you know, whatever, I'm just going to use cash." Well, understand this: only 8% of our money supply is cash. And so, yeah, fine. You can get a haircut. You can get, you can get a manicure, pedicure. You do whatever with cash. But your direct deposit is all happening digitally. Good luck. You're going to pay your mortgage with cash. I mean, so again, realistically, and by the way, at the end of the day, cash is still fiat currency. Cash is still this made up money printed out of thin air that's lost 40% of its purchasing power since 2020. Using cash doesn't solve the fact that you're still supporting all of these wars all over the world and everything that the government does with this fiat currency. And so cash is not the answer, but cash will become surveillance cash as well. So understand that that's a problem. So as they're looking to ratchet up CBDCs, they can't have competition. That's why they're going after people in the crypto space. And again, this isn't even a theory. Biden signed Executive Order 14067 on March the 9th, 2022. And this executive order authorizes two things. It authorizes the US to explore a CBDC, and it also authorizes a whole of government approach to cracking down on digital assets. And they mean whole of government approach. It's the SEC, the CFTC, the FBI, the DOJ, the IRS, the Treasury. Like during this, so when I did my first presentation on this, I remember it was at PorcFest, it was like 2 years ago. And I had like a slide of they're going after people. And I had 3 people that were under arrest. Now I've got a whole slide with like 12 people on it. And I have, I've had 3 friends thrown in prison since I started trying to warn people about this. I'm not warning anybody anymore. I'm describing what's already happened. Yeah. So there, I'm not. And then the conclusion I came to after understanding how money works and studying the Federal Reserve and the banking system, I realized we already have a CBDC in terms of what people think about a CBDC. What people are concerned about is they don't want their transactions monitored. They don't want to be censored and they don't want to be debanked and they don't want money that's programmable. Well, I've identified 13 federal programs today that are already used to track people's financial transactions. The IRS is already using AI working with your bank to analyze your transactions. There's no new thing needed to do this. This is actively going on right now. If you read your contract with your bank, you don't own the money in the bank. They can cancel your account without cause. They can sell or share your financial information without your consent. They can change the terms and conditions without your consent, and they can actually change fees without your consent. I mean, this is actually what we've agreed to when we do a click wrap agreement or whatever, when we set up our bank account, or if you go in person and you set up a bank account, you sign these forms that no one reads. We've already given that up. That's already done.
That's a no-brainer. Yep.
So, so there's NSA bulk data collection. They can use the Patriot Act and without a warrant come in and shut down your bank account. Then they can issue something called a national security letter where you can't talk to anybody about it, including a lawyer. This is already actively something that happens today. Money is already programmable. Anybody that has a health savings account or a flexible spending account, this is a relationship with a bank where you have a card that you can only use to buy certain healthcare items at certain times from certain places. This is programmable digital money. MasterCard, there's a MasterCard pilot that was done with the UN.
Did Hunter Biden get that special card that allowed for hookers and blow?
Well, apparently he did. Apparently he did, but but it was trackable. But he got to play the pardon card. So, but all those transactions are there. There is a MasterCard that tracks your carbon usage and shuts off if you use too
Nuts.
much carbon. That exists based on the existing system.
It's nuts.
And then all these people have been debanked. Melania Trump, everybody else. Like this is not even just a niche thing or even thing involving criminal activities. So those are the things people worry about with CBDCs. We already have that today.
Let me ask you a pragmatic question. What happens if you're somebody who is banked, right? But you want to be forward thinking and you're like, what if at one point in time I were unbanked? What would you counsel people proactively do with their money?
Well, I've did this in 2019. I mean, I've moved into a combination of privacy coins and gold. I mean, I use something called Cake Wallet, and
By the way, Cake Wallet, Diego Salazar created it. I know we have had some discussions around Epic Cash. This is an Epic Cash centric channel,
Yep.
but Diego is the one who created the Epic Pay wallet, which I think you're familiar with because I wanted to send you some that have you can play around with a little bit, and then he also created the Stack wallet. And I just talked with him a couple of days ago. He gave me this is breaking news, everyone. He gave me some inside information, which is in the first quarter, he and his team are considering just kind of not entirely hitting Control Alt Delete on the Epic Pay wallet, but he said that there's so many improvements we can make that instead of going in and the infrastructure that's there, they have this vision of basically just recreating it so that now as a medium of exchange, it will rock. So anyway, that's all I know about it, but you mentioned Cake Wallet, so
what I was going to say, and if there's a way to integrate this with Cake Wallet, because the one thing I like about Cake Wallet is it's multi-asset, and it started out
exactly
with a focus on Monero. So
that's right.
the reason I picked Cake Wallet is because I have a multi-asset approach. So when I'm trying to onboard new people, you asked what about that? I said, well, use Cake Wallet, get a couple of privacy coins. You can actually buy gift certificates from within the wallet. So, because obviously a lot of merchants don't take crypto directly. So an example that I use is, when my kids, when we had going, I guess it was not a couple weeks ago, but before school started, we went out and we bought their back to school clothes. We went to Old Navy. So I used Monero, bought a gift certificate at Old Navy. We went and saw a movie. I bought an AMC gift certificate, went to the mall, went to, I think, Red Robin, bought a Red Robin gift certificate. So, there's,
Awesome.
So this is one, so start buying crypto and start using. Now, this is, the end solution that we want is we want people doing peer-to-peer with privacy coins. Right?
Exactly.
We don't want gift certificates and all this other stuff. It's a continuum, just like what we're up against. So I'd argue we already have a CBDC. It's already digital. Yeah. The money is created when the federal government goes to the Federal Reserve and issues an IOU. The Federal Reserve creates the money out of thin air in an Oracle database. That is actually how money is created. That is by definition a central bank digital currency. If it's the Federal Reserve creating,
of course,
but it can get much worse than it already is, which is why they're building systems that can do 1.8 million transactions per second, because they want to tie our movement and all of our activity to a social credit score and to money. And so that's not a level of programmability that the current system can handle. I mean, it could handle something like, measuring carbon usage, but it can't handle measuring everybody's activity and tying your social credit to your money. But they've already built and they're piloting systems that can do 1.8 million transactions per second. So we know where they're going. They're moving towards that level of a system. We need to move. We're not going to immediately get everybody using privacy coins peer-to-peer. So we've got to start moving in waves. So start buying privacy coins, start using them, start using these tools and wallets, and then see how much you can move away from the system. And there's something else called Spritz Finance that I use, where you can, unfortunately, you can't use it with privacy coins yet. So sometimes you actually have to, convert or swap to a stable coin.
Okay.
But you can actually pay your bills. Because one of the things somebody says to me is, oh, you live on crypto. Well, how are you going to pay your electricity bill? Well, you can actually do that using Spritz Finance. You can off-board cryptocurrency to pay your electric bill, to pay your mortgage in some cases, to pay your student loan bill, to pay your car payment. You can use services for that. So again, this is on the continuum, on the way.
Have you ever talked to the people from Spritz Finance? I mean,
I have not. I've been meaning. I want to talk to them because
I would love to, and we can have you on too as a returning guest. I'd love for Mike and I on decentralized TV to be able to interview someone from Spritz Finance. So, I mean, yeah, finance. So if there is a way to be able to connect with those folks, I think they would enjoy that platform to be able to spread the gospel according to Spritz.
I would love to. I will actually try to get that set up. And then actually maybe we can talk to them about integrating privacy coins, because that is the way. So I actually want them to do. So I've got a whole roadmap for
beautiful.
What I'm trying to do here, because so I do these workshops where I teach people how to do what we're discussing here. Right? So actually onboard people to crypto, give them some privacy coins, explain and show them how to do what I've been describing, how to buy gift certificates, how to pay all your bills. But next year, I'm adding the component of actually onboarding merchants, so that in this workshop, we're going to have merchants that are going to be able to accept cryptocurrencies coming out of the workshop, and then newly onboarded people to crypto. And my goal is at the workshop, at the end, for people to be able to do peer-to-peer commerce. So newly onboarded people to crypto to be able to buy products and services from newly onboarded merchants, because we have to get there. We have to, it's not going to, that part of it's not going to be fast, but we have to start doing that as we move down the continuum, because it is a race, by the way. And
agreed.
We could go in a million different directions about how Bitcoin is being used as a psyop to basically divert attention from what we need in terms of peer-to-peer commerce. There are a lot of different ways we can go.
Yeah. You know how you mentioned earlier how this is the time to where privacy crypto and the players in it need to get on the same side of the table instead of an either or discussion and those type thing. I know what you're doing with your workshops. I know what you're doing with Cake Wallet. I'm going to challenge you, Aaron, to consider a multi-asset wallet created by the same guy that created the Cake Wallet, Diego. He has the Stack wallet by CipherStack. It is an amazing multi-coin wallet, and be able to evangelize not just one solution, but two, because then that at least people can consider what I think to be Satoshi's real vision as far as its execution and design, which is Epic Cash. That there's a lot of things that we could discuss in comparison of these, but you want to be able to have a privacy coin that does not have data on the blockchain. So even if ultimately quantum attacks came into existence, if there's just nothing to see, there's nothing to see, and something that is fast. Because ultimately, if we're going to go peer to peer and it's going to be cash, you can't have a blockchain that's going to be so heavy or so fat that it's going to take a minute or minutes to be able to settle. So I'm just planting that seed with you before we kind of dive into some of these private crypto alternatives.
Well, again, my goal is, the end goal is to separate money and state and to provide easy to use tools for merchants and consumers. That is my goal. So I mean, look, my interest in privacy, 6 months ago, I wasn't talking about privacy. 6 months ago, I was kind of like, oh, well, let's,
right.
Bitcoin, maybe Bitcoin Cash or these other things. Now, I will say one of the things that is new that's coming out that relates to Zeno is something called confidential layer, where you're going to be able to bridge your Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum into Zeno. So it's a way to take transparent blockchains and make them private. But understand, we need all of these solutions.
Exactly.
Because they have 1.8 million. And I will tell you, this is the other thing. We don't focus on usability in crypto. And by the way, this is our fault as a community. I think a lot of this stuff has been like 20-year-old guys developing stuff for 20-year-old guys. The CBDCs are going to be user-friendly. The CBDCs will not require you to even have a wallet. They will use touch by pay cards. So it's going to be something where and it'll work for the visually impaired. It will work under all scenarios. I've delved into all of the different things that they're building. And by the way, a lot of people say, well, why? Nigeria was one of the first countries to do a CBDC. And people ask me, I actually was on the phone with some people from Nigeria. They're like, hey, Aaron, why did our government do this? And so I looked into it. Well, your government didn't want to do it. The IMF and the World Bank came in and used a combination of penalties and incentives, as they always do. And what they wanted out of it, knowing that Nigeria only had 45% internet access, was a trial run to work out the kinks, so that, when you're rolling something out like this in the United States, how do you get rural areas in West Virginia? Like it's pretty ominous what they're doing. They're much more coordinated with their information
Right.
and their endpoint, which is all CBDCs on one platform, and then all of our other assets, not just money is going to be tokenized, stocks, bonds, our house, our car,
Yes.
using the same programmable, controllable money on one platform. They've created this thing called regulated liability network. So all of the countries will be connected on one ledger.
God,
So you'll have a single platform, global platform where all digital assets can be mined. This is how you will own nothing. This is the technical way that they're going about doing it. And they're doing that while people are buying fart coin and buying NFTs. And I got to tell you, I actually hate bull markets because people are like, oh, how this is cute. Like they're building a complete dystopian control system. So
yeah.
every time we have one of these bull markets, and we're not even trying to innovate. Hey, we at least used to have ICOs where people pretended to have
Right.
companies. Now we don't. Now it's like, okay, it's hot dog token. The whole purpose of it is to go to $1.50 because Costco sells a hot dog for $1.50.
That's right.
Like we've got to get our act together and we have to
Yeah.
compete because freedom is on the line.
Well, the goal with any crypto, the nirvana would be a crypto coin that would be a combination of it's a store of value, a unit of account, and a medium of exchange, right? I think we
Yep.
got that from the Satoshi's white paper. And usually it's choose two, right? That's kind of the best you can do. And I would argue that that it is possible to have all three, but I do want to get into some of the alternatives, the privacy coin alternatives, and I have the benefit of having an article here that hasn't been published yet, but it's really good. You're gonna love it. And actually, the header of it is Zeno, the private version of Ethereum. So it's a lot about that, but. I just want to read a little bit to you and then get your commentary. So, the importance of privacy protection is becoming increasingly clear to the general public. Zeno, Monero, Firo, Zcash, and Epic Cash use different technology to make transactions secure, confidential, and efficient. There's a plug on Epic Cash. Epic Cash is based on the revolutionary Mimblewimble protocol, which was originally a proposal for better scalability of the Bitcoin blockchain. The unique approach of exchanging data between sender and receiver outside the blockchain makes it possible to completely dispense using addresses on the blockchain, which offers extremely strong privacy protection as a side effect. In addition, bulletproofs provide cryptographic evidence of transaction amounts without disclosing them. Almost done. The additional cut-through unique to Mimblewimble protocol removes data no longer required for security from the blockchain, which allows a considerable amount of storage space to be freed up and to increase both privacy protection and scalability. So we're back to the medium of exchange being critically important. It needs to be fast. So the summary on Epic Cash was it embodies the original spirit of decentralized cryptocurrency, the lean architecture, and the clear goal of creating a private and scalable alternative to cash without providing additional functions. Speak in favor of Epic as a digital cash version that comes closest to Bitcoin in its original vision. So within the article, they talk about Zeno a lot. Monero, Firo, Zcash, and Epic Cash. Are there any others, as you are doing your due diligence, that you think that we should be aware of and consider, Aaron?
And again, I'm still exploring and I'm always evaluating things. Pirate Chain is one,
Yep.
I believe. And Litecoin has just implemented Mimblewimble. So I believe there's optional privacy on Litecoin.
But
So
that's on 2%. So those opting in for that is just like waving your hand, say, look at me. And so that's one that once you do a little bit of research, I think you will probably not consider that as a viable privacy alternative. But
I mean, my preference is, I always say like privacy by default
yes,
is ideal. And then, but if optional privacy is still better than no privacy. So
sure it is.
in the realm of I'm actually in the process of building a gold-backed privacy
Tell
stablecoin.
us about that. I love this. Tell us about that.
So I'll tell you, so one of the biggest problems that I've had when I talk to merchants, merchants, again, this is the pain point that we have is merchants don't accept cryptocurrency. And there are a lot of reasons why this is the case. But I think the last survey from the Federal Reserve was that only 0.5% of Americans used crypto to buy something last whatever quarter or whatever the time period was. This is down from
That seems like a lot to me. I mean, honestly, as crazy as that stat seems low, I would submit it's less.
well, it's down from 2%. So we're actually losing ground. And a lot of the reason for this is this Bitcoin buy and hold, never spend,
Yeah,
hijack narrative. That this is the big part of this, right?
that's right.
But the other part of it is there were point of sale systems, like BitPay is probably still the largest, but they're not accepting new merchants. And then there have been other point of sale systems that have gone away. But when I've talked to merchants, the concern that they have with taking crypto, they know the dollar's losing value, but it's the volatility of the price. They don't understand
Absolutely.
how to look at that. And so,
Hard.
but they all want gold. They understand that gold is a better store of value historically than the dollar, but also it's not very, you can't transport it very easily. So I'm like, well, why don't we combine the best? Why don't we have a stable coin that's backed 1-to-1 by gold in decentralized vaults in different countries but you have a privacy coin. So you have the privacy of Monero and low fees.
Yep.
But then if you want to redeem for physical gold, you can also redeem for physical gold. And that is, I will say, and this idea came about because of my conversations
Right.
with merchants and there's more demand. So I'm in a race now to actually get this done because I think this is one of the missing pieces because that would actually get people on board. People are very hesitant about even if you look at Bitcoin, well, Bitcoin's always gone up in price. Well, I can tell you as someone who's lived on crypto that, there are some periods of time where you're keeping your burn rate as low as absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And then you're waiting. And then when there's a bull market, then you're making capital expenditures, but that won't work for small businesses on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited about that. And again, I say it is that will be just one solution. I'm not a maximalist for my own thing either. It's just another thing to put into.
Well, if I may, and I know that you're connected with him, Mike Adams, but he was invited in on with a group from Texas, and it was, I believe there were some lawmakers in there. There's some, I mean, just a lot of smart people. And he was invited in to consider, they wanted to do the same thing with a private crypto backed by gold. And so I share that with you in that maybe you could just reach out to him through Signal and just ask him if he has any data on that, because who knows? It's like 1 + 1 = 11. Sometimes he may be able to connect you or whatever, but I know that he was working on, or not he, they consulted him. But that was a little over a year ago that he was invited into that meeting.
Yeah, there have been a lot of different, and there are gold-backed coins, but a lot of them they're on Ethereum, which means it's not usable for day-to-day transactions, and it's transparent. So
Yeah,
honestly,
right.
honestly, this kind of emerged because of Zeno. I would not have
Great.
been able to do this. And now I'm like, okay, yeah, clearly I've talked to a whole bunch of people. The hardest part is the construction of, you'd want an entity issuing the tokens and another managing the gold. Like the gold itself is going to be managed with an auditable wallet where you're going to be able to actually see and audit the gold. Like
Right.
so the tokens will be private, but you have to actually make sure that the gold is audited. And so figuring out where to do that legally from a jurisdiction perspective and everything else, that's actually been the hardest part of this process for me.
This article, Zeno occupies a special position among all privacy cryptocurrencies as it has implemented a hybrid consensus mechanism of POW, proof of work, and proof of stake, which enables staking with simultaneous privacy protection, as well as the possibility of creating your own projects on the Zeno blockchain that adopt the privacy protecting properties. So that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's the ability to create your own tokens that have the same inherent properties of Zeno itself. So again,
That's
it's like
awesome.
it's like the
Mike and I interviewed who's the head honcho of that project.
Andre.
Yes. We have a interview on decentralized.tv if somebody wants to go on there. Spirit of full disclosure, I'm really crap with names. So Mike can just, oh, that was Andre Bull. but I just know that he's probably one of the first 20 people that we interviewed, and we've done 70. But it was a fascinating interview, and it really gives you some insight into what I just read here and what you're talking about. He is very much a visionary, and I personally have a lot of work to do to get better familiarized with Zeno, because I think that's going to be a privacy player it's well funded, and we just have some work to do. At least I
Well,
do.
I mean, look, this is the challenge with this space. I mean, you see like Hawk token, you see all these other things, and so you actually have to do a lot of research in this
Yeah.
space, and it's not easy to understand. So I learned about Zeno from Roger Ver
Okay.
when I interviewed him on my podcast in March, and then actually when he got out on bail, he reached out to me and he didn't want to talk about his case. He actually saw an interview that I had done talking about how we need easy to use wallets and point of sale systems. He said, "Hey, look, you really should look at Zeno." So I'm like, all right, well, if Roger, who I know and respect, he's out on bail and the thing that he wants to talk to me about is Zeno.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I looked into it. So I read the white paper, I read all the documentation, downloaded the wallet, and I did a huge deep dive. So I've now met with the team, I've met with them all in person and everything else. I'm like, wow, this thing has so many innovations. And what I've found out is that this guy Andre, the lead developer, actually created the crypto note, which is the technology behind Monero. So this guy is when you talk about being an OG, like this guy is the OG.
Yeah, that's right.
He knows who the creator of Monero is. He
Yeah,
worked with him, sat at a desk next to him. He
right.
still knows who he is. This Nicholas von Saberhagen, who people like, they
Yeah,
don't know who he is. He sees him a couple times a year
right.
still. So that's how much of an OG this guy is. And
I mean,
so,
they go back so far. They ate Cheetos in bedhead and underwear while they're smoking coke. You
yeah.
know?
So it's an incredible technology, but it takes a lot of time. Like then you're like, oh wow, this works like this, and then I never liked proof of stake. Like there are a lot of things for me that because if you got indoctrinated into Bitcoin, a lot of people take all of if they compare every attribute to Bitcoin, and if an attribute isn't the same as Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is the standard, and so it must
Oh,
be horrible.
absolutely.
And then I started to realize how wrong that is, in part because now we're realizing the things that people thought were strengths with Bitcoin are flaws. Like for instance,
Yeah.
not having funds or not having done like a pre-mine for development. So Zeno has a pre-mine for development, but it's in an auditable wallet, and the project's been around for 5 years. So you can
Yeah.
see, well, Bitcoin didn't have that, and everybody's like, yeah, it's great, it's open source. Well, the problem with that is it turns out developers don't actually work for free.
They
So the
do not.
Bitcoin developers ended up being funded by people from the intelligence community. They
Yes.
ended up being funded by MIT. Well, is that a big win? Is this something that we hold as a
Bingo.
principle now? Oh, not having a development fund is a great thing. It's open source. Certainly nobody working for free is going to be influenced by outside sources. That's turned out to be a disaster. And with the hybrid proof of work, proof of stake model, it's actually more secure using their model. But when I originally heard that, I was turned off of proof of stake because of my understanding of how Ethereum works. When
Yeah.
I think of proof of stake, I think of, oh, it's an oligarchy like Ethereum. So if with Ethereum, you have to have, I don't even know what the number is now, but if you don't have enough Ethereum, then you can't stake. So in other words, if you're not wealthy and in the ecosystem, you
Right.
can't determine which blocks get added. Well, how is that any different than the Federal Reserve? Then on top of that, because it's a transparent blockchain, you can see who's actually doing the proof of stake, and then those people are subject to either influence or actually subject to being hacked. What Zeno did was it's a hybrid model, so every other block, it's proof of work then proof of stake. But the proof of stake it's probabilistic, so anybody can participate in this, even if you have just one Zeno.
Okay.
You don't have to have a minimum amount, but it's actually confidential. They've added the confidentiality so you can't even see who's doing the proof of stake, which is that's actually mind blowing when you sit down and think about the implications of this. So this is one example. There have been several like, oh my God moments, eureka moments about Zeno through the process where it's like, oh wow, and then this is how they did this, and this is how they did this. It's like it's
Oh, it
phenomenal.
sounds fascinating. The only issue I have with Crypto Note, and I remember this after interviewing him, is that as the size of the transactions and computing power increases, the scalability decreases because it just still carries all of that within the blockchain. So I don't know how ultimately that is going to become anything that can be used like cash.
Well, there are improvements being made to that as well with both Monero and with Zeno, and I think they're even talking about moving to dynamic block sizes as well. So, I mean, it's already more scalable than Bitcoin, and they're already
Right.
thinking about and working on ways of making it more scalable. So, so the good news is that they're actively working on this. One of the things that I really liked about this, and maybe Epic can be at so I went to Monerotopia, and the thing about
Yeah.
Monerotopia is there were people there from multiple projects. And what
Right.
I saw was the Zeno people were working with the Monero people and were asking questions and sharing ideas. I think if we take this approach of, um,
100%.
in order to defeat this technocracy, we all have to work together. If we take that approach and people actually share ideas, we will be much better off than
Well,
trying to convince everybody that.
let's join forces. I don't know what the timing is of Monerotopia, but perhaps I can go with you this year and, can be a combination of uh, representing for Epic Cash, but also decentralization, decentralized TV, and being able to maybe I can work with Mike and we'll figure out how to do some feet on the street interviews with some of these fantastic projects.
Oh, that would be great. So it was in November. I think it's in November every year.
Okay.
And I don't know if they're going to do it at the same place. It was a phenomenal place. It was actually the talk that we were doing, the big area for talks was in a
Yeah.
geodesic dome. And then there was like a marketplace. And so basically they were onboarded all of these local Mexican businesses to be able to
Oh,
take
that's cool.
Monero. It was a phenomenal event. So yeah, I would definitely, I'll talk to Doug Tuman about that.
Okay.
And by the way, related to this, I have an opportunity. Have you ever been to PorkFest?
No, I have not.
So this is the big Liberty event for the Free State
Yeah.
Project. In fact, it's now the biggest Liberty event in North America. As many as 3,000 people show up. So many people were onboarded to Bitcoin early on in 2012.
Yeah.
And last year, privacy coins far outpaced Bitcoin. They have a thing called Agora Alley. So it's a week-long event at
Yeah.
a campground. Well, I have an ability to get a huge tent for the entire week where we can have talks, and I want to make it
Oh, that's
privacy themed.
awesome.
Was talking to Doug about doing a Monerotopia, but doesn't mean it's just Monero, just like Monerotopia wasn't.
Yeah.
Because and so get a whole bunch of different privacy coins.
Look, I would like to be the voice, the evangelist, like Mike and I are on DTV, to where it's like if you're for privacy, come on in. You know, let's talk. Let's talk about your project. I'm over the red team, blue team, us versus you, epic trash versus blah, blah, all of that stuff. No, man, we got to join forces here. And I would love to cover that too. No, this is all really, really exciting. And I hope I know we need to wrap things up here, but I have to tell you, man, I am more confident than ever that a lot of really smart people are emerging who have the right mindset, that we've kind of been through a cycle or a phase to where we're emerging from it and we're realizing that, look, 1 + 1 + 1 in privacy does not equal 3, it's 111. And that just means all different projects coming together can be worth so much more, right? From
Yep.
an influence standpoint, from a persuasion standpoint, than us going it alone together. So that's my commitment, man. If you're for privacy and you want to come on my show, let's talk.
Awesome. That is that's the only way we're going to win this.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that's been helpful for me is because I have been evangelizing and telling people about CBDCs and people in the crypto space. a lot, there's been so much focus on the individual projects that we haven't been looking at what governments are doing, what central banks are doing, and what traditional finance is doing. And so we're actually on defense now. We have to work together because we are behind. I mean, again, a couple 100 million CBDC accounts. And when you look at how fast the rollout, the EU is close. The EU's already piloted. They're getting ready. They're working with Amazon, with AWS to roll out their CBDC. And understand these CBDCs, none of these are transparent, open blockchains. These are all permissioned solutions that only these people can control. They try to pitch it as being about financial inclusivity, which is about as opposite as it could possibly be, right? I don't know how it's financially inclusive, that it's inclusive and that everybody has to use a surveillance system. There are a lot of people in the US that only exist, but can't get a bank account, and they exist cash only. Do you think they're going to be welcomed into a CBDC system? I mean, this is not a big win. So, no. So I think now that people are starting to understand the magnitude of the threat, we realize we have to work together, and they're really great people. And I will say the other thing is,
yeah,
it's really interesting with Bitcoin to what most of the early Bitcoin supporters and even a lot of the early Bitcoin developers have all moved to privacy.
Right.
I met a guy, Amir Taki. I don't know if you've ever had him on.
Oh,
I'll tell you what, you got Amir. If you can get Amir on,
okay.
Amir, I believe, was the 5th developer on Bitcoin. Just an absolute rock star. And he left the project. He's a citizen in the UK, and I don't know all the details. There's a documentary on it. He went to fight ISIS in Syria.
Wow.
Not as part of the UK government. He just went. And then they put him on house arrest because because I guess you're apparently not supposed to do this. This guy is intense. He's now started something called DarkFi, which the goal for this is he's created a bunch of anonymous privacy tools because his approach is this. Listen, they're going after all these developers. They're throwing people that do mixing services and everything in prison. We're going to create communication tools and tools that allow anonymous developers to develop privacy.
Man, we need to have him on DTV. So
remind me if I don't.
I will.
I'll see if I can connect that up because he is phenomenal guy. But I don't know if you happen. I know we're probably running out of time, but did you see that HBO documentary about Bitcoin a couple months back where they were trying to? So they tried to say Peter Todd was Satoshi.
Right.
Well, in that video, they show Amir. So Amir, I guess, worked with Peter Todd or brought Peter Todd in to work on Bitcoin. When he started DarkFi, they just didn't show this in the movie. When he started DarkFi, he considered bringing Peter Todd in again, and I think determined he's a Fed and wouldn't let him involved in DarkFi. So that HBO show trying to paint Peter Todd as Satoshi, not only is Peter Todd not Satoshi, Peter Todd, we really need to start investigating and looking at, and I may be asking Amir what he learned about Peter Todd's ties to the intelligence community, because Peter Todd is the guy that put in replace by fee in Bitcoin. He's the one who made it. So they made it so that it's a 1 megabyte cap, and then you have to bid up the transaction fees. Peter Todd is the one who implemented that, and the funding for that came from a guy named John Dillon, who worked for the intelligence agency. So a lot of just stuff to unpack.
Wow, total subterfuge then.
Absolutely.
Man. Well, this has been fantastic, fascinating, educational. Thank you, Aaron. You are a great guest.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now I know why you're on this crazy circuit, but thank you. I'd like to end, if you don't mind. What can people do who are watching now to participate in freeing Roger?
So go to freerogernow.org and sign. There's an open letter that you can sign. It only takes 15 seconds. And this really helps. This is actually one of the reasons Ross Ulbricht's sentence is likely to be commuted, because they collected 600,000 signatures. And so I think we're at 16,000, 17,000, and we just got started with this, but it really helps because we're trying to show Trump that there's support and that there's momentum. So do that, and then share the website with your friends. You can post it on social media, but understand that links to external sites get suppressed. So contact friends directly and tell them to sign the open letter. And this site has all the information that you could ever want about the timeline, about the case, links to the motion to dismiss. You can actually learn more about the details of the lawsuit. You can learn more about Roger. So everything is there at freerogernow.org.
Wow. I would go binge watch all of that, but I don't like scary movies, you know? I mean, this is a scary Halloween movie to me. It's just nuts.
Well,
How,
we're all going to be living. I'm telling you, when I started, but again, I remember this when I did my first talk about my book, The Final Countdown at PorcFest. This Aria DeMezzo, who was one of the Crypto Six, was at PorcFest, and she had to check into prison the next Tuesday after PorcFest. And so she was there. Uh, she had a golden retriever. And so she was trying to find somebody to watch her golden retriever. That's how I started. And then a couple months later, Ian sentenced to 8 years. Then 7 months later, Roger arrested. I'm telling you, this is real. This isn't a warning anymore. This is actively going on
yeah,
all around us. So
yeah,
we have to stop it. And believe it or not, signing this open letter helps.
yeah. The canary has spoken, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, listen, let's do that. So you mentioned your book. Why don't you tell everybody the name of your book and where they could find it, Aaron?
I wrote a book called The Final Countdown, but I actually wouldn't get that right now because I'm writing a new book that
Okay.
goes into a lot more detail. I would actually check out Hijacking Bitcoin, which is the book that Roger wrote that nobody
Okay.
wants you to see. That is a phenomenal read, and I will say because I've been talking about it for 6 months, no one has refuted it yet.
Wow.
um, which is bizarre, by the way. There's an actual BTC maxis actually have a list of people to block. There's a proactive list. So somebody will say they'll send me a tweet. They're like, "Oh, have you heard about this guy? Or you heard what he had to say?" And then I'll go look at his account and I'm blocked. Never heard of the person before. Never
No
engaged
kidding.
with the person. There's a GitHub with a list of people that they block.
Oh,
So this is active censorship, and they do not want people to read this book. I think this book is one of the reasons that Roger is in the situation that he's in. So
amazing.
I recommend it.
Well, perhaps you can send a link to Roger of this interview. And if so, Roger, I want to wish you well and let you know that there's a whole community of Epic Cash enthusiasts behind you who understand that you are, man, what's the world? Your legacy in crypto is unparalleled. Let's just say that. And we thank you. So, all right, Aaron Day, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for in the chat for watching. Really appreciate it. I think we got to a good number of live folks watching, and then of course afterwards I will post this when it renders. Then I'll add a thumbnail to it and some links to you, Aaron, and such. So, listen, thank you
Thank
everyone.
you.
And I really wish everybody a great weekend. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that good stuff. Aaron, thank you.
Thank you.
You rock.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
All right, everybody. We'll see you. Cheers.